All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian Freimert's Tribeca Trade Group, and today is the second of the month of August, and we will go through a lot of things to go through today, a lot of big movers today. Today was a really fun day to trade, and, looking back at the last couple weeks, it just seems like whenever we have a day that starts in the red, it's been some pretty good results. Not every day, but kind of just looking back at some of these candles in the S&P. You have one here. We started the day. We went lower. We came back. So it's just been very constructive when we end up, when S&P futures start the day down 40, 50 basis points. Honestly, I thought we would have been down a little bit more, considering that Shanghai and the Hang Seng were down 2.2%, and the DAX, when our market opened, and I think even when they closed, was still finished down about 1.5%. So I was thinking we should be down a little bit more, but it just shows the buyers seem like they sit on their hands and wait for a red day and then start coming in and buying everything. That, and I think also, the buyback plans are now turning back on after being off. Some of the names that reported last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, are probably starting to buy back their shares again. So I think that's a contributing factor. We talked about that in last night's video, that that can make August particularly interesting, with those buyback plans starting to come back on, as names have been kind of rolling out of their quiet periods. So the other thing is, I have to say, so we'll talk a little bit about Tesla. That kind of that had some follow through. If you remember from last night's video, it wasn't up that much. I was saying that an earnings trade may not have worked. Well, it would have definitely worked. Just a huge day in terms of that. It actually went a little bit above last month's point of control, so it paused here, I think, at one point, but. If you play Tesla at all to the long side, it closed on the damn highs. So really nice. If a couple of people traded that in the room today after they reported earnings. And then, of course, the other big story was Apple. But there are so many other stories, too. Apple just huge monster beat. I think Jim Cramer had a pretty good analogy that he put together last night, which I didn't watch every second of it because I was multitasking yesterday. But I think he was comparing the valuation between Apple and Procter and Gamble. And he had a pretty good point, that Apple is, pretty cheap relative to its peers. So I think that helped kind of fuel the fire a little bit. And I'm sure he wasn't the only one that was saying that after a really, really good earnings quarter. So the other thing is, that I find funny, I was joking around because everybody was downgrading the FANG stocks. And, the other thing, and, I said this, if you're a member of the room, I talked about this pre-market. That's where my focus was this morning, because it seems like whenever they talk about trade tariffs or trade war, the FANG stocks are more sheltered. So it seems a logical place after a washout. And that's what I played today. So I'll go over, but to finish my thought, they're a little bit sheltered from the possibility of a tax war. There's no taxes that you could put on the internet, at least right now, as far as trade tariffs, that is. So that seems to be where money starts to rush back into. And, these things cycle. So everybody was bearish. Several brokers put out, sell the FANG stocks. And, like we said, these things kind of run their own course, right? When things, get expensive, people take profits. They wait for things to kind of come into them, and then they buy. So Amazon, look at this bar in Amazon today. I mean, you could even say, I had the S&P chart up, but same thing with the Qs. The Qs had to put in a really nice move. But I've been stalking Amazon for basically every day since they reported earnings. I've been just waiting, and was ready to pounce today. And I'll show you what my signal was on the Q on Amazon. But yeah, the Qs kind of look like a lot of charts are going to look similar. We noticed that in the application, enterprise, infrastructure, software names. Tons of charts look almost identical because a lot of them all sold off, and then people are coming back into them again. But that's, Qs gave a real nice look here after coming out of this little structure. But I'll show you what I was looking at. I always find the 1 hour charts. One of my colleagues, Webb, I gave him, props as he should get. This value area study that I have on my charts is probably one of the best. It's the best support and resistance level indicator slash study that I think you could have on your charts. It is just so good in terms of giving you signals. Now, of course, you have to follow them, and you have to click the mouse and click the mouse when it doesn't work. But look at this signal, and and this is what I tweeted out earlier, if I can find this. But basically, here's what I said, and I tweeted this out. What I did in Amazon. And I do a lot of these structures because Amazon is an $1,800 stock, so I'm not really big on buying an $1,800 stock, but I will devise option strategies where you're kind of synthetic long, but you have leverage. So what I did was I sold next week's put spread for 250, and here's what I was looking at. Oops, I don't think you. Let me see. Sorry, I've got the wrong thing up. Let's see. Let me go to my sent items here. And my tweets. From today. So here it is. So here's what I was looking at, and this is where I sent this out. Right inside first bar, I was waiting for this 1 hour bar to close. Again, this is on the 1 hour bar, and this is this week's value area. So I was looking at the first bar to close in here, and I said 1894 is your support, and that is where I went long call spreads and I went short put spreads. And then of course I was developing bar, but like the turn that is taking place. And if I zoom out of this. So here's what I did. I bought the 1820. So I bought a $10 wide call spread for 375 and financed that by selling a put spread. So I was able to take the short put spread completely off today for like $1. And look at what this thing did today, all the way from 1800 to 1834. So this was this is a colossal winner. I mean, it really helps when trades start working right off the bat, and you catch something like that. But to take this example a little bit further, take a look at some of the other FANG stocks on the 1 hour bar. Notice that Facebook gave you a signal today as well. Big wide value area for Facebook because of what it did for earnings last week. But basically your bogey, in which I said earlier in the trading room, is 173.70. So I would be long Facebook unless it breaks 173.70. That's a very easy stop out if it doesn't work. Netflix, on the other hand, still has more to go to get to the top of value, and Google not ready yet. So Google has to get into value, and notice it just for whatever reason, just like Amazon was kind of resting, it's resting. So really, I think putting an alert at 12, call it 12.49, is where I would get long, Amazon, and maybe do a similar structure where I sell a put spread and go long a call spread. Basically go synthetically long, considering how expensive the stock is, which is around 12.40. All right, so those are some examples, but going back to some of the application, you got a nice buy signal from ServiceNow as well into the value area, just like that. I would use a 181 stop in there. PayPal, so Square is another name that had a huge move all the way through to the top of value there in Square. Again, I'm on the 1 hour bar, which again gives you some really good signals with that, but all the way back to a 52-week high. So huge move. And then of course we saw a ton of call buying yesterday in PayPal. And look at the move in PayPal today. So I took some targets. I've been adding a couple different days this week. I've been adding to and taking advantage of the weakness in PayPal. So I was able to take some off today. And if you go back to my alerts, 470 versus 40. Also had this trade on of Docu. This was a really nice signal that was brought to our attention in the trading room. By the way, we've got a hell of a trading room. People really coming up with some good ideas. Look at this. Look at the signal in this stock. So we got into this stock, I think, in here, and it actually did one of these, and you're like, uh-oh. And just as my point, if you attended my webinar last weekend on short-term option trading, you might as well just, rather than, stop yourself out and for like a very low amount in options, you might as well let it ride. So for example, if you got in at an option and I think my entry price was around $1.50, and it trades all the way down to 30 or 40 cents. For me, there's no point in unwinding it at the 30 cents. You might as well, let it play out, because stocks recover, and especially names that are have some volatility to them as well. So, short-term options, my opinion is you put in what you are only willing to risk, and with short-term options, you don't really use any stops unless you kind of change your mind, right when you're in the middle of a trade and it's at your cost basis, and if you change your mind. But other than that, I think letting trades ride that are short-term trades, short-term catalyst trades. But so that's a hell of a move, and I'm looking for follow-through. I did take a target in this, but really nice out of this move. A couple other names. Look at this, and one of my favorite stocks because of the initials. CF had nice earnings. Look at the breakout in this thing. So if you don't want to chase this name, which I think is more upside, maybe to 55, which I will be watching for tomorrow, you could look at the MOO ETF. This is the whole agriculture space. Nice looking setup here. I think right pushing to that downward trend line in the MOO ETF. That has Mosaic in it. AGCO, I think, is in it. Archer Daniels, Midland is in that. Which that name also had good earnings the other day. Kind of gave you a little bit of a fake out, but is back to the highs. So that's that. What else? I feel like, again, there were so many big movers. Names that reported after the close today, which I go over. We go over all the names already. So I'm kind of repeating names that as names are coming out. It's one of the benefits. I go over. I have the Bloomberg terminal up, and we kind of go over names as they come out. But Take Two. Let's see if Take Two is still up there. I think it's right up to the implied move, which I think was 122. I did play this name. So if you go to our earnings channel, I did the 116, 120 call spread, so that's looking good. Godaddy, which is kind of interesting because they had a good number for Godaddy, and they didn't. As I like to say, my favorite phrase for earnings is they did not knock the ball out of the park for Godaddy, but they beat on the top line, the bottom line, and they upped their guidance. So it could be a buying opportunity, I think, for Godaddy. Shack, we saw a little bit of this last night too. Companies dropping their guidance a little bit. So they beat on earnings, but they dropped their guidance a touch. And that's why they're down. I'm out there trying to buy shares, and I don't think I may not get it today, but I would be a buyer if we get down to, right around here, which I have an order out there, I think at 58.60, and if not, I'll try to get that tomorrow if there's further weakness in the name, right at that virgin point of control. All right, and I feel like I'm missing some other names, but the video is 14 minutes long. Just my thought on the overall market. It looks pretty constructive. You go back to Qs. And by the way, IWM, who everybody's gotten so negative on as well, back above the 50-day moving average. So if you're disciplined and you use that 50-day moving average support or stop, notice we're back in value as well, new value area. And we're above the 50. So, no one has a crystal ball. If you want a long in IWM, basically use your support. And if it breaks there, then I would get out because you have this down here. But for now, let's see if it can contend with this. By the way, IWM is another area to watch when they talk about trade wars, trade tariffs. Small caps always seem to lead us higher. And that was the first index to go green today. So a great place to, very important to watch the small caps when we have a little bit of weakness in what they do. What else? My final thoughts for the day. If you're, and I talked about this earlier, if you're a very disciplined trader, this market will continue to give you these opportunities, and you don't have to be super weighted to equities. You could be patient and wait for a down day of 50 basis points, because again, you did not have to be overnight. You did not have to be long overnight. The market opened on the lows today. So, this market is a little bit different. It's always changes from time to time. But right now, these days where we come in and we start the day down are much better than when we start the day up 20 or 30 basis points. It becomes a struggle when we come in the market when futures open higher. So, I think at least once a week we've been getting opportunities like this where we start the day down on the day and we come back strong. So, continue to play this pattern until it doesn't work anymore. All right, guys, have a great night. See you tomorrow.